Kelly.
I recognize that room. That's the room I stayed in when I was with you.
Yep. This is our guest room / office. So you know it well.
I do. It was quite cozy. I loved it.
Good. I'm glad. And the bed wasn't too short for you?
No, it was perfect. The diagonal approach worked just fine.
I can't believe you had to sleep diagonal.
Oh, believe me, that's not the first time I've had to do that.
I'm sure. I felt like you had come to visit my short land here. All my short people in my house. Well, so this is our first call since you traversed here and then went back to Seattle. So I will introduce myself first. My name is Dr. Heidi Pitak, and I'm a communication professor and enjoy training folks in the corporate world in communication skills and also working with clients on their interpersonal communication skills. So what Kelly and I are doing with the Heart Perception Project is definitely in line with everything that I'm passionate about. I'm a conservative Christian. I live in the Bible Belt, Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm pretty much surrounded by people like me.
And I'm Kelly Newton. I'm a progressive non-theist. I am a massage therapist, have been a massage therapist for holy mackerel, 20 years now.
Wow.
And I work with people in all states of vulnerability. And I have learned a lot in this setting. And I'm currently training as a core energetics practitioner. And core energetics is a really dynamic and thorough form of personal growth work that helps people shift on all levels of their being. So physical, emotional, psychological, in their actions and in their connection to their higher self. So yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, and I voted for Hillary and Heidi voted for Trump, and we're still friends.
We're still friends. Really amazing. Yeah, we were talking about how the parameters that we've given ourselves in our relationship with the Heart Perception Project have allowed us to talk about things that normally we would have stayed away from because they would have been too big of hot buttons and too big of triggers. I don't think we could have gone there. Yeah. And I'm thankful for these parameters that allow us to remain open-hearted to each other and allow us to stay in a curious frame of mind instead of a judgmental frame of mind. And that makes all the difference.
Right. And what I'm struck by in talking to more people about this generalized inability of people to talk to each other without exploding is that they think the only alternative is to not go there.
Yeah.
And which definitely keeps the peace.
Yeah.
But then it means an entire part of who you are doesn't get to show up in a relationship.
So true.
So what we're about is allowing the entire self to show up, but in a way that is allowing for the other person's entire self to show up too. And without a sense of one person gets to win and one person has to lose for that to happen. So.
Right. Now, I do think that both people have to come with that same perspective. I was teaching a session last week and someone in the audience said, well, this is all fine and good if both people are able to be emotionally healthy in the conversation, but what if you're approaching this kind of conversation with someone who is not emotionally healthy and is not a safe place for you? And that it makes it very, very challenging. But I did tell her that I still believe that there are methods that we can use to bring down the emotional temperature of the conversation, even just asking a what question instead of a why question. I've seen it work in my own life, that if I can ask, what is it about that made it difficult for you? Or what is it about that it creates such the fear that I see? What is it about that makes you feel afraid? If we can ask that what question, and instead of saying, well, why are you so upset about it? Which just immediately shuts somebody down. But even asking those curious questions can put us on a level of being able to learn more and to understand better.
And it also is often true that one person is more skilled than another in the conversation at these techniques. And yes, it's a very different experience when both people are coming at the same level of skill. But the person who chooses to walk this path and use these techniques and keep their hearts and minds open and their curiosity intact, yes, like you said, they have the ability to keep the conversation and the experience in a more heart-centered place.
Yes, that's right.
Or at least encourage it.
Right. And to be aware of yourself when you are jumping out of that heart-centered place.
Right. Which will happen.
Kellie and I were talking how when you came to visit, we found ourselves many times, even driving from event to event in the car, realizing, wow, we are really treading on some fine lines here with triggering each other and coming from such very different worldviews. We realize that the opportunity to trigger each other is there all the time. And staying aware of ourselves, that's super, super important. And we had to stop and go, okay, I'm realizing I'm feeling a whole lot of energy or emotion here in me, and let me try to figure out what that's about.
Yeah, so the transparency of the process going on within us and being aware of that and asking questions like, what's going on with you? How did that land?
Yes.
I'm feeling nervous. How are you feeling? This is edgy for me. Is it edgy for you? Like, what level can we have contact with each other where we both can deeply relate to what's going on, even if what we're talking about, we're coming at it from different places.
Right.
And I was just struck by how slowly we needed to go. And that's another key piece, I feel like, especially in hot water or landmine riddled territory. It's important to go slowly and carefully and with the intent that I'm here to learn more and understand more. I'm not here to beat the other person down, or I'm not here to win an argument.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we got a call. I got a call this last Friday from the radio station there in Seattle wanting to interview me. And I know you got to go in person, but one of the questions he asked was, so from what I understand, you're not trying to change each other? Like, it seemed interesting to me that, like, this is a novel concept that you and I, that our intent is not to change each other. Our intent is to better understand each other and to find a way that even in the midst of our disagreement, we can still have a friendship.
I remember, that's so funny you asked me that, because I talked to him a few days before he called you and talked about how pretty much one of the only ways to be successful in these interactions is to release all agenda of trying to change the person. And that kind of gave him pause. I remember him sitting there and kind of chewing on it. And so that's funny that he brought that up.
Yeah, that is funny. It's just really is a novel concept.
Yeah. So how, I know how it's been for me since I came back. I mean, I'm curious if we were to compare notes a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, I got terribly sick. I think that just maybe the amount of emotional and intellectual and spiritual energy, everything that we put into that weekend, um, maybe it affected my immune system, weakened my immune system somehow. So I was very sick for a number of days, just recovering, and realized how much work it takes to process all that we're going through in this. And it really, I think both of us have used the word exhausting, that it was exhausting for both of us. And even I think what made me smile, even though it was incredibly difficult, is that we talked about abortion on the way to the airport. After all we had talked about, we saved one of the most difficult conversations for on the way to the airport, and then sat in the parking lot and talked about it more and tearfully expressed our hearts to each other. And that was a very hard conversation. And for me, as someone who completely stays away from hard conversations, or I have in the past, for us to talk about abortion as our last hurrah, I thought, oh my goodness, I've come a long ways.
Oh, that's funny.
Now I need a nap, a really long nap.
I mean, yeah, that was a really edgy conversation to end my trip with. But growing up with my dad, who went there all the time with like just in your face kind of topics, I was like, okay.
Yeah, and I get that, and I do think that our backgrounds have a lot to do with how comfortable we are with having those hard conversations. And I didn't grow up in a family where we battled it out verbally. We really tried to stay away from conflict and had a hard time figuring out how to resolve it once we got into it. It was could end up being a scary place for me. So I know for you, that wasn't the case, and you had a whole lot of that in your home, which allowed you to become comfortable. And maybe your personality plays into that as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah. So, yeah, for me, I didn't get sick, but I did feel, I felt that deep exhaustion, and I think more mine was like kind of a psyche pendulum shift. Like I had spent the whole weekend like choosing not to go down the rabbit hole of trigger, in situations that historically would have triggered me.
Right.
And which is great. It was a very valuable experience to see that I can choose how I can respond.
Yeah.
I can choose my response, and it can be authentic, both exterior response and interior response. And when I, so spending the entire weekend, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to be here and mind open, heart open, and get to know people and get a taste for what's going on over here. So I came back home and basically having spent a weekend being, striving to be open to the other team, I had, and I wrote about this, but I had my usual walk with a dear friend who's very progressive, and she's she's a strong woman too. And, when we venture onto territory that she feels deeply about, she's pretty reactive and strong in her opinions. I don't know what that's about. So she was asking me about my trip, and I was just telling the story. She wanted to tell the story, and I said, it was like, for me, a totally innocuous part of the story. And I was like, oh, and we had, we were doing this inflammatory t-shirt exercise, and we had to go get a t-shirt, some Trump paraphernalia. We had to go borrow it because Heidi didn't have any of it because she's not a Trump person. And my friend went, whoa, she voted for Trump. She's a Trump person. And I was like, no, it's not that black and white. She said, yeah, it is that black and white. Boom, just like on the tracks, just barreling down that. And then, so what happened to me is, after having spent an entire weekend of being open-hearted and tolerant and just like, really holding space, I basically like energetically slam her for having that reaction. And, and this is somebody who's on my team,
right?
So it was just like, whoa. I had, she called me out on it. And then I was like, oh, well, yeah, good point. Okay, let me look at that. Like, it has to work everywhere, I can't just hold space for this group of people and not do it for this group of people because they're not on board with what I think needs to happen as far as like heart and mind open,
Yes. That's so true.
It was a very valuable experience, very humbling, and also revealing of how insidious our minds are in terms of boxing people out or in and creating judgments about what's appropriate, what's an appropriate emotion to have, what's not an appropriate emotion to have. And so this isn't easy work.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, to think that you became aware that we can even judge those that are on our own team and put them in boxes.
Right. Well, because like here I am holding the space of what I truly experience is like being loving and open-hearted and allowing.
Yeah.
And even that can have a shadow side to it if I'm not careful, because then how do I judge people who don't want to go there themselves?
Right. And then I can think somehow that I'm superior because now I know how to communicate.
Right. Oh, so insidiously tricky. Yeah.
I will say for my community to have you come here was a very, very cool experience. And I've just heard such positive feedback from friends and neighbors and other folks that got to get to know you and genuinely like you. They're like, hey, Kellie and I have been texting. We've been sending Facebook messages, or, I'm planning on going to Seattle with you because I want to meet Kellie's family and friends, So I think that even that is valuable because there's nobody here that will think of a progressive non-theist if they were putting them in boxes. They will never be able to do that again because they do. And now there's a face and a person and a heart that is representative of a group of people. And not that we can even stereotype that and say that all progressive non-theists are like you. We can't do that. But we can say that all people have many layers to them. And that getting to know someone helps us to take those boxes away.
Yes.
And just stay in a curious place to want to understand better.
Yeah. And I do want to let you know that by far the majority response over here to, what we did the weekend I was over there has been amazing and open-hearted and curious. And I can't tell you how many times people told me, oh my gosh, it does my heart good to hear that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even the radio guy who interviewed us, when the microphone is off, he said, I got to tell you, I read the news every day and it just wrecks me.
Yeah.
And hearing your story is like an antidote to that. It's like soothing my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not the first person to say those words. Like, my nervous system feels deeply nurtured by what you're doing. And so people are craving this. People are craving a way to see through to heart connection.
Yeah.
With, people that our media our media teaches us, and our politicians teach us how to yell at each other.
Right.
And try to win at an argument by talking louder and shaming the other person.
Yep.
And people are feeling the effects of that. They are.
And they're realizing that type of communication doesn't work in real life.
Mm-mm.
It just doesn't. And it doesn't lead to any kind of a world that I want to live in. That's for sure. Yeah. I think we're giving people hope. And that's when he asked, one of the last questions was, what is the one thing that you would like people to remember? And I said, there's hope. There's hope for our families. There's hope for our neighborhoods. There's hope for our communities. There's hope for our nation. If we can learn to stay curious and put our weapons down and really connect with each other on a heart level, there's hope.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Well,
so we got to, we're close to nailing down a date for you to come here. It looks like April is going to be best.
I think it's going to be April. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we'll go on from there.
I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
And meanwhile, let's keep up our talks. I feel like, we might have to dive into some more intense conversations with each other.
I know. I'm wondering also, there's a number of people around the country who are doing things similar to what we are doing.
Yes.
And I would love to talk to them and find out their heart behind it. And if we can have a coalition of folks that are all about this, then we're stronger together.
Yes, I agree.